Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Boruto episode 202 review. Alright guys, this episode right here was pretty much everything that I wanted to see, and it definitely did add a lot of great anime only content that I'm pretty sure that a lot of you guys liked as well, especially with Boro. But the first thing that I do want to talk about has to be Sasuke in this other Otsutsuki dimension, seeing a bunch of Otsutsuki members and also seeing the brand new Otsutsuki member Isshiki Otsutsuki, and also coming not necessarily face to face but actually finally seeing the leader of the Kata organization, Jigen. Now, a couple of things that was added into this scene I do want to point out. Sasuke pretty much filled in a lot of the blanks that a lot of the manga readers actually had when we were actually going through it for the first time. One of the big things was the fact that we thought that Kaguya and Isshiki Otsutsuki were actually teammates. In the Boruto manga, when Sasuke was actually going over this, he didn't necessarily put two and two together. We thought because Momoshiki and Kinshiki were paired up on the same stone tablet, then of course Kaguya and Isshiki Otsutsuki themselves would also be a pair, just like Momoshiki and Kinshiki were. Sasuke in this episode right here theorized that as well. Another thing that they added was, as soon as Sasuke actually did press the stone tablet, he pretty much went directly towards the other Otsutsuki member, and the first time that we did see this was against Kinshiki Otsutsuki, was with Kinshiki Otsutsuki, and Kinshiki actually did try to attack Sasuke. This right here is absolutely insane. I didn't necessarily expect for this to happen. I was super happy that the Boruto anime actually did add this, man, because it's something completely brand new. Sasuke goes to Kinshiki, then to Momoshiki, and it seemed like he was a little bit surprised to see Kaguya up there, and he went extremely quick to go look at Kaguya Otsutsuki, and lo and behold, Kaguya was also there. But of course, the brand new Otsutsuki member that was introduced in this episode right here, Isshiki Otsutsuki, even Boro was talking about him in the Boruto anime as well. He presses Isshiki Otsutsuki. We didn't necessarily get to see Isshiki Otsutsuki's face because obviously they want to save that for the right time, but Sasuke pretty much sees Isshiki Otsutsuki and understands that there are other Otsutsuki members out there. This right here in the Naruto verse is going to be absolutely huge, because unlike people in the Naruto verse, they don't necessarily sit there and speculate, or possibly they do, but they don't necessarily sit there as much as us and speculate how they could possibly be other Otsutsuki members out there. We have been pretty much talking about this to nauseum, but now Sasuke, I'm pretty sure after Sasuke is probably going to tell everybody else, they are now going to understand that there could possibly be multiple other Otsutsuki members out there, and unfortunately for them, they're probably going to come into contact with one very, very quickly. But regardless, Sasuke goes down and he basically sees the 10 tails. It's kind of confusing, man, because Sasuke didn't necessarily notice that it was a 10 tails. He just called it a tailed beast. But regardless, he sees the 10 tails looking at him, but also Jigen comes directly after that. Now, at this particular point, my heart's beating out of my chest. I mean, when I was watching this for the first time in the Boruto manga, I fully thought that Jigen and Sasuke were going to actually fight in this episode or in this chapter. And there was a dialogue between Jigen and the 10 tails. At this particular time, I'm not necessarily going to go into detail about exactly what that is, because I don't necessarily want to spoil it for the anime only. And during this time when I see in the Boruto manga, I had absolutely no idea what this meant. But Jigen actually told the 10 tails that you can't eat me just yet. We have to wait until the vessel is 100% complete. And obviously we know Kawaki himself is the vessel. But Jigen also absorbs chakra from the 10 tails. Now, once he absorbs chakra from the 10 tails, we see his karma seal actually expand, and he actually does activate his karma seal. Now he goes into another stage of the karma seal. We already seen Jigen with this form of the karma seal, but there is another form of the karma seal where Jigen actually does grow a horn. Now, I do want to point this out. The Boruto writers made it very clear that Isshiki Otsutsuki had a horn, and Jigen himself grew a horn that was very similar to that Otsutsuki member's horn right then and there. While I was watching this in the Boruto manga, I 100% thought that Jigen himself was the Otsutsuki member, and I thought that was that. He probably just had on some sort of disguise or something like that, and once he activated his karma seal, or that particular form of the karma seal, he 100% took the form of the actual Otsutsuki member that Sasuke seen in this chapter or in this episode. Right after that scene, Jigen drops an absolute bombshell. He pretty much said that he was going to pay a visit to the two vessels, Boruto and Kawaki, and of course, because he just absorbed chakra from the 10 tails, it very much seems like Jigen is 100% preparing to go into battle. So obviously in the next episode, and we've seen this from the preview, he is going to be battling Naruto, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the video that I have later on today. But regardless, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, just off of this, it would have been one of my favorite episodes of the Boruto anime, but they had a brand new anime only plot line which involves one of the Kata members, Boro. This right here has to be one of the more confusing things for the Naruto fans, because we understand what the truth is. At this particular point, Boro might be completely brainwashed, or is actually brainwashing other people into thinking that the Otsutsuki clan are these big, almighty, and actual great creatures. But it turns out that they are not that. What we understand is that the Otsutsuki clan, they pretty much only care for themselves, but Boro, on the other hand, he's pretty much feeding everybody else, or possibly even believes, a completely brand new idea. Now, one of the things that I do want to talk about before I get into Boro's actual religious beliefs, I do want to talk about what he actually did take from the blimp that crashed, the one that Kawaki was actually riding in. Now, at the beginning of the episode, Boro enters the blimp and he picks up something that sounds a little bit weird. It sounds a little bit squishy. It sounds a little bit slimy. And of course, later on in the episode, he pretty much asks Kashin Koji, in theory, but obviously because he's not necessarily talking to Kashin Koji, he asks Kashin Koji how he would actually be able to explain that being left on the blimp that crashed. Obviously, the big thing has been the fact that there is a traitor amongst the Kata organization, amongst the Boruto anime fans, and obviously amongst the Boruto manga fans. We have all been speculating that it's probably going to be Kashin Koji, and it turns out that Boro has the same exact idea as well. And what it looks like is that Boro actually has some evidence. Now, the thing that Boro actually found, one of the things that I thought it could have possibly been, was a toad. We understand that Kashin Koji, just like Naruto, just like Jiraiya, his summoning animal is a toad. We've already seen him summon 3 toads, one versus Victor, one that he has monitoring Kawaki as of right now, and also that huge toad that we seen when he pretty much pulled up on Boruto, Kawaki, Konohara, and the rest of Team 7. But because what Boro picked up was a little bit squishy, I have an idea that it could have actually been a toad. But one of the things that makes me think it probably wasn't a toad is mainly because, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, obviously, when the person actually did come and try to attack Boro, Boro said that the thing could have been shattered, and obviously toads can't shatter it. So I'm not necessarily sure what it's actually going to be, but I have an idea, or have an inkling, that's probably going to be a toad from Kashin Koji, who's gonna make Kashin Koji look very, very suspicious. But with this religious thing, I have an idea. Boro might not actually 100% believe what he's preaching. Now, what Boro is preaching is that the infinite Tsukuyomi could potentially save everybody from all their hardships, and that Otsutsuki members are actually trying to be the ones to actually save everybody from their hardships. But the Kages from the 5 great nations don't necessarily want that to happen, and because of that, they actually did kill the other Otsutsuki members that tried to save everybody in the world. Now, here's why I feel like it's possible that Boro doesn't actually believe this. We understand that Isshiki Otsutsuki is that Otsutsuki member that he's talking about, and if Boro himself is actually in direct contact with Isshiki Otsutsuki, it would make sense for Isshiki Otsutsuki to try to tell Boro, like, hey, I want you to round up a following to actually follow us and be willing to actually carry out our plan. If this right here actually does get on a huge scale, it would pretty much be all of the shinobi villages alongside Isshiki Otsutsuki versus the 5 great shinobi villages. It's essentially like Kaguya rounding up a whole bunch of white Zetsu. But of course, there's definitely that other possibility that Boro actually does believe what he's talking about, and that in itself would definitely be a very difficult thing, mainly because the Boruto manga readers understand what the future holds for Boro. The last thing that I do want to talk about is the Boruto writers basically showing a little bit of Boro's abilities. This guy right here is extremely durable, and this episode was on full display. I talked about this guy in a preview, and I talked about how this guy could have potentially been a shinobi. He actually cut Boro in half, or the top part of his body in half, and Boro in a matter of seconds put himself right back together. Now, this in theory should have went through multiple vital organs and even cut his spinal cord in half, but it turns out that none of that actually mattered to Boro. I'm not necessarily going to say that Boro is stronger than Naruto, but I will say that Boro is definitely making a case for being a very strong and worthy ninja to actually fight against Naruto and Sasuke in the future. But let me know what you guys think about this episode in the comment section below. As I said, I thought this episode was very, very good. The overall feel and the overall aura of this episode was absolutely amazing. The information that we got with Jigen, with Isshiki Otsutsuki, with Sasuke, and also with Boro was absolutely amazing. Let me know what you guys think. But it's been your boy Baara, and we out.
It's a knife.